Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another AO2 webinar. Just getting started here. We'll give everyone a few minutes to drop in, but excited to have you all here today. And you are definitely in for a treat this time. Once or twice a year, maybe we do an event that is just the AO2 team. And when we do, it is really a deep dive into something we've all been in the trenches doing. And so you're going to get a lot of expert advice. You're also going to get a lot of different opinions. This is not a super scripted webinar. We do have a deck and we're going to run you through some stuff, but it's going to be very editorialized. So you're going to hear what everyone here actually thinks about the things that Amazon is throwing at us and other marketplaces if we get into that. But we are really focused today on Amazon Prime Day and how that is going to impact Q4 this year, since Amazon has thrown us already a few wrenches in preparing for Q4 this year. So just going to give it another minute here as you're dropping in. Feel free to say hello in the chat. We'd love to know who's here, where you're joining us from, anything you want to just share with the team. If you have questions, though, we do have a Q&A, and so we ask that you throw your questions in the Q&A. You should see that at the bottom of your screen. Depending on what browser you're using, you may need to click the more button to see that, but we do have a Q&A specifically for you to put those questions. So throw them in there, skip the chat for that. That way we make sure we don't miss anything. We do typically take Q&A as we go. If it's applicable to what we're showing at the time, we may save some for the end, but we try our best to answer all questions live. And we are about 3 minutes in now. So I'll go ahead and get our deck queued up and then give our panelists a chance to introduce themselves so we can get right into the content. I am sure we will take all of the time that we have today. Alrighty, so I forgot to go back to the beginning of my deck. Apologies. You're going to see the whole thing in reverse real quick. Here we are. So welcome again. Thank you for joining us for Prime Day 2026, the data-driven blueprint for Q4. What we are going to be talking about today is how to use what you learned in this earlier than normal Prime Day to drive what you're doing for the rest of the year. And because of how events have shifted this year, we're going to have a little bit more time than typical to learn from these things and adjust for them. So who do we have speaking here today? I'll introduce myself first, and then we'll just kind of go in order of where it is on this slide. I am Jessica Wright. I'm CEO here at AO2, and I've been in the e-commerce space for almost 20 years now. I started on the brand side, and I've been brand accelerator and agency over those almost 20 years. So wherever you are in your e-commerce journey, I have probably been there at some point. I understand whatever it is you're dealing with and can bring hopefully a unique perspective to help talk through those things with you. And today we have, as I mentioned, two people from AO2, two veterans that I have worked with for over 5 years, and I'm excited to host with today. So Alexi, I'll throw it over to you first if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Jess. Yeah, I'm Alexi. I have been in the e-commerce space basically as long as I've known Jess and Edward, so coming up on 6 years now. But my background is in advertising and profitability, and so being able to look at working with our brands and being able to look at behind the scenes as fulfillment fees go up and all the other costs of ad spend goes up. Where can we, run a deal where it makes sense and where the profit margin is there to give us that overall lift? So, but I oversee all of our client services. So every brand that touches us, whether it's Amazon, Walmart, or any of our other offerings, I play a little piece in the background and always here to chat. So recently we brought on board Edward to be our Amazon account director. So I will let him introduce himself.
Hey, everybody. As they all said, my name is Edward Ruffin, and I have been in the Amazon/slash e-commerce space for over 10 years. And I also come from a background in advertising. I am a nerd. I will go ahead and get that out of the way. I enjoy e-commerce. I enjoy how it works, and it's all very interesting. and I am the Amazon account director here at AO2. So I oversee our account management team and work closely with our advertising team as well. And just excited to dive into everything today.
Awesome. Thank you both again so much for joining today and talking through this with us. Here's what we're going to cover. We'll endeavor to do it in the next 35 minutes and leave plenty of time for Q&A. I cannot say we will stick strictly to this schedule, but we will do our best. So here's what we're going to be covering today. What actually happened Prime Day 2026? Reading your own results, understanding your spend, CPCs conversion, and how that how you actually performed, and then how that impacts your Q4. Mistakes that were made earlier in the year that are bound to come back in Q4 and what you can do about those things, and then really turning all of this information into a Q4 plan. So, poll number one, we're going to ask here, and I'll get that launched in just a second. How did Prime Day 2026 land for your brand? Just want to get a pulse going into this, so let me launch that real quick. And then get everyone's feedback here. Let us know, was it your best Prime Day yet? Was it up, but did it cost you more to be up? Were you flat, or were you down year over year, specifically comparing to Prime Day 2025? Because of course, year over year was not a direct comparison this year. We'll leave this up for a few more minutes, and this will just help us understand really who we're talking to today and how to frame this. So far, interestingly, best Prime Day yet. And a few people saying, yeah, it was up, but it cost. Alrighty, go ahead and end that. But yeah, overwhelmingly, best Prime Day yet, which I think we did see some positive results across the board, but I personally think it was more of the we were up, but it cost us more. So very interested in those who had success, but not at a higher cost. All right, so here is your Prime Day by the numbers this year. And we've got a few sources for this. We pulled the best information that we could find, and also, really taking a look at our client base for this, but 26.4 billion in US spend across the event, which was, as Amazon claims every year, a record total. And this was the first event held in June. And I think a lot of us will probably have something to say about that later, but it was an earlier shift without a lot of notice, which is why I think, a lot of brands had to pay a little bit more to have the successes that they did. On average, there was a 48% growth in advertising spend, but only a 34% growth in attributed sales. So we did see that there were better sales, that brands did absolutely have their best Prime Day yet in some cases, but it cost them more to do it on average. Some of you maybe actually had better than average and not higher spend. And I suspect, like some brands I know, we haven't fully unpacked the numbers, and we think we've had a great Prime Day. And then as we get into those numbers, we find out actually where that extra spend was, and maybe it wasn't as positive as we thought it was. So just talking about how all of that actually worked. I know, Edward, you're here as our resident PPC expert. I know Edward said he's a little bit of a nerd for this stuff. Some of you may know him from his past as PPC Ed. So I'd love if you could dig in a little to this slide and share anything that's, not shown here that you have opinions on.
Yeah, I mean, year over year, when it comes to Prime Day, when it comes to tentpole events, of course, there's always going to be a lift in just expected spend that you have to put out in order to really stay competitive on the marketplace itself. And this year was definitely a lot more spend up front. And I do want to call out that this was not just during the actual tentpole event for the 4 days. This was even leading into it to some degree as well. So spend and competition continues to inflate across the board, being completely transparent. I remember back in the days where you could start off all your campaigns with a 50-cent CPC, and that was cool. You could actually get something out of that. Now we're seeing much higher average CPCs, of course, depending on the marketplace and the category that you're really, focusing on. But with that being said, there's a lot more expectation to be more competitive during the 4 day event and any tentpole event as a whole. There's a lot more competition in those non-branded keywords, especially where you have to fight a little bit more to get even page one placement, or even competitor page placement is something else that's really been growing quite a bit, where you can target those competitor ASINs and get that placement on their own listings. So people, not just you, people are spending more. People are being more aggressive. They are definitely stepping up, a little bit more, trying out different ad types, especially with video ads becoming a bigger player in the field. Those are great. They capture more attention. But with more and more brands taking advantage of those, the competition increases, and you're going to see inflation on the spend and the CPCs there. So, all that to be said, I think this is something we can expect as we move into Q4. There's going to be higher competition. This is also something that Amazon does speak to quite a bit. They understand you have to pay, you have to be competitive, you have to advertise at this point. So long are the days of just putting up a product and hoping that it sells. You have to get it in front of people. There's a lot more products out there and a lot more competition overall. So this is something I think you definitely want to expect as we're moving into Q4 and any other event moving forward. Get your ad campaigns set up early, make sure they're in a good space well before the event, and be ready to start, increasing those bids day over day to make sure you're getting the impression share and getting the placement that you want where it makes sense based on conversion. I'll say that.
Yep, absolutely. Alexi, anything to add there before I move on?
I think you're good. I'll jump in on the next one.
Awesome. Okay. So yeah, there has been a shift this year, and I do know Alexi's already looking ahead to this slide because this is something she has been very passionate about this year. We saw Prime Day move um, in June instead of July. I think we all kind of thought as a result of that that the um, Prime Big Deal Days event in fall would also then move back as a result. So we'd see a tentpole event in Q1, 2, 3, and 4. And it doesn't look like that's happening. So yeah, Alexi, if you want to jump in here and kind of give us the rundown on this, would love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, so yeah, I think Jess said it well. I mean, we all deemed that it, especially I deemed that it would make sense for a P&L that you have a big tentpole event once a quarter so that your P&L for that quarter looks good. It's good for the brands, it's good for Amazon. But I think it just goes to show us that like Fall Prime Deals Day hasn't in the past moved the needle enough for Amazon to justify like this has to be like we have to have something in Q3. So I wouldn't be surprised if something shifts later, in a future year, they do end up, doing that one per quarter. But the biggest thing that I see is looking at that max price. They've updated the look back windows for so many of the PEDs, and having two events in Q4 that are within the 60-day can mess a bit with what that low price can be. So having to have the lowest price in the past 60 days, we need to be mindful with what is run in October and how that could affect what's run in Black Friday. Now, it just has to be 5% lower for past 30 days, but the event, with the events being so close together, we do need to watch those windows, and it makes it a bit harder, trying to plan these out. So I would say we can treat, June as a new planning anchor for this. So, and then moving forward, I do see them this continuing. But I think, the lack of publicity around the event leading up, so many people didn't know Prime Day was happening. I mean, we were in the midst of moving and got a lot of things from Amazon at the time, and our boxes did not scream Prime Day, the weeks leading up to the event, which is an odd, last year I feel like they blasted it so much that everybody knew, hey, this is the first, we're doing 4 days. And then for Prime Deals Day, the fall to stay the 2 day, which I know we all have opinions about 2 day versus 4 day. But for it to stay, the 2 days, I think is just, yeah, it's an interesting shift and endeavor. So
Yeah, and I think at this point we're still making the assumption that it's going to be 2 days. They have confirmed. So Jeff has answered or asked a question, and I'll answer that live now and also dive into the 2 day versus 4 day thing. Amazon has confirmed that they are going to keep the fall Prime event the same time as last year. They have not said the specific dates, so they haven't confirmed yet which exact dates, but we are reading that as it will be that first week of October again, and it will once again be a 2-day event. We thought for a while it was going to move back to September, Jeff, like you're asking. Really we're expecting that to happen. And then they release the inventory dates, and that's usually the biggest indicator for us of when the event's going to be because we know inventory has to arrive 4 to 5 weeks ahead to be able to be processed and ready for the event. And they announced early September dates and then very shortly after let us know it's going to be at the same time. That's all they've said is same time, but we have to assume that means that first week of October again, and the inventory dates back that up. All right, moving right along. So there, again, as Amazon says every Prime Day, record totals, but definitely smaller order volume. So shoppers were seeking out different things this year than we've maybe seen at different Prime Days. And I think this maybe goes back a little bit to Alexi's point of people didn't know that it was happening. So maybe we're just doing their regular shopping and got on the app or on the website and saw some deals on other things and started adding in. But slightly different shopper behavior and how did that impact brand approach? Was there enough time live in the event to change the approach and adapt to these behaviors, or were shopper behavior and brand approach working in contrast for this event? And I know you both worked with brands, so whoever wants to jump in there first.
Yeah.
I'll jump in. Oh,
Oh, sorry.
just really fast. I will say, with it being the 4 days, especially, there is different buying behaviors where day one, you can see a lot of traffic, especially through the advertising side. You can see a lot of spend up front. I do want to say, with the caveat of data delays, still be patient. Don't just pull the trigger. Don't just cut things off just because the data is still coming in. I think that's a huge thing to always keep in mind. But especially with it being 4 days, there can be a lot of browsing, a lot of adding to cart potentially during the first day, but then you may not actually see that conversion come through until day 4 because people, just like you said, they're looking for deals. They're still browsing on Amazon, but then also browsing on off channel, looking at Target because they had some deals going on at the same time. Same thing with Walmart too. They're going between different platforms and trying to see where the best option is for them. So that's something that I have personally against with the 4 day is the lack of urgency when it comes to completing those purchases. And there can be a chance that people may just abandon those purchases. But that's where you can do things like, the cart abandoner audiences through AMC. You can take advantage of that, where you can still try to coerce them to complete their purchase even after the fact. So there's still opportunity. But I just want to call that out. Just with the 4 days, the buying behavior has definitely changed compared to traditional 2-day events.
Yeah, so you think that was maybe more related to the 4-day event than the lack of notice or the shift in the timing?
I think it's a huge combination of both. I think all of my friends had no idea that Prime
Yeah.
Day was happening. My parents didn't know. My extended family had no idea what it even was, but that's another conversation. But yeah, I think there was a lot less marketing behind it until the actual event went live and you open up the app or you went onto it and there were large banners announcing it. And then that switches something in the shopper's brain where they're like, oh, well, let me go look for deals. And they may not even know what to look for because they haven't been preparing it. So they're kind of just looking to see what's on sale as opposed to, oh, well, these are some items that I usually purchase. Let me buy those again because I need more of them or
Yeah.
something of that sense.
Alexi?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think I am like many shoppers add things to their cart and then wait and see, how these deals shift in order to make the purchase. But something that I saw a lot tested this year was having a deal run. They were running 20% off PEDs day one. And then normally I'm the type of shopper that waits until day 4, personally, and kind of waits it out. And so, I'm looking at these products and I see, okay, it was 20%. And then the next day it was, 25% off or 30% off for day 2 and day 3. But then it went back to, back to the 20 on day 4. So I think that's going to be played with a lot more this year, or just in general with these longer events, because day one and day four in the past have been those stronger days, with day two and three, being a little softer. But this year, we saw a little bit more spread than years past, and I do think a lot of that's just the lack of people knowing by the time they realized it was day two or day three. But I think that that's going to come out more as we're doing if Amazon continues to do these 4 day, longer tentpole events rather than the urgency of you only have 2 days, you need to get it right now.
Mhm. What about so obviously, this slide talks a lot about holding AOV through bundles, multi-pack, subscribe and save, things that are different than just offering massive discounts on Amazon. I have two questions there, and I don't want to spend too much time on this slide. So if either of you have opinions on either of these things, great. If not, we can move on. But did we see brands offering less discounts and taking advantage more of some of the things that are mentioned here? And then what do we think about how the new bundles that Amazon is putting together for sellers, how will that come into play for Q4? And I think that's something really worth mentioning because I'm not sure that all brands even know that this is happening and that there's a time frame to like take advantage and do anything with those. So if either of you have opinions on that, would love to hear.
We did on a few brands for sure. We ran discounts on multi. I've never seen a good lift with buy one, save a percentage on a second, item, which is similar to this, because you're trying to increase that average order volume that way. But some of the 2 packs or 3 packs, or even just the larger size of the product, running the deal on it so that you get that brand halo effect of the largest size got ran the discount, but then people said, I still didn't need that. So then they end up getting the smaller size or the 1 pack that doesn't have a deal. But you brought them to the page because there was a deal on your higher price
Right.
product. So that's something we played with for a lot of our brands and did see that brand halo effect for this Prime Day.
Yeah, and even through advertising, being defensive with their advertising, cross targeting, getting placement on your own ASINs, but also driving traffic to your storefront on Amazon is another way to increase that basket size and to increase just how many units are being purchased. So even if you can't risk as much with a larger discount because it's just going to get into your margins and affect your overall profitability, keeping them in your ecosystem, advertising on your own listings, and really increasing that cross sell and that upsell to get the larger sizes, to get multiples, to look at the virtual bundles where possible too. That's a huge way to keep them in your brand as opposed to seeing just other products and general searches on Amazon too. So I think this is just a telltale of drive traffic to your storefronts on Amazon. Man, like make sure they see your brand and not other brands. Like show off your brand, be proud of it, and then they'll purchase from there, and then they can buy multiples and maybe not even know the other brands that are offering similar products if you're good with it.
Yeah, that driving traffic to the storefront has been a massive shift, I'd say, over the last 12 months. Brands have started to adopt that more and more, and it's still new enough that I think a lot of people in the space are still conflicted about how to advise brands on that. But I think that's an AO2 philosophy for sure. We're all in agreement that that is a massive play right now because it is one way to spend less to get more eyes directly on your
Mhm.
brand because that's the one place right now that you don't have competition advertising.
Well, and the deals page. Like if you're
Yes.
running a deal, you're supposed to get a deals page on your storefront. And if you are not seeing that when you're running a deal, open up a case because that should automatically be something that exists. But that's a great spot if you're running a few different deals. Like consumers will go to that page and they can see all the deals you're offering across the board and then you're not just seeing the PEDs. You might see a 5% or some other deal that's being run or a coupon that the consumer may or may not end up clicking anyway, and forgetting to click it, to clip the coupon. But that's another just a great place on the storefront. You can showcase all your deals across your entire brand without anybody else, jumping in.
Yeah, that's an excellent call out too, and I think maybe correlates with the new virtual multi-packs that Amazon is doing too, because For anyone who's not aware, I think probably most brands at this point know about virtual bundles, which is something you as a seller can create yourself within your account. And there are a few perks and things you can do with that. But Amazon actually, after Prime Day this year, introduced a brand new feature where they will be creating virtual multi-packs on behalf of sellers. It's very strange to me that they are calling them multi-packs versus bundles. Like the seller facing feature where you can do it yourself is called a virtual bundle, but Amazon has a different name for what they're creating on behalf of sellers. We know these things don't always last with Amazon, but right now that is something that they are doing. And when they create them for you, they're creating them as a straight multiple unit multi-price. So if they add two, they just make the price the multiplier of two of your units. But you can go in and change that. So you can go in and add a deal on those, drop the pricing on those to make them more appealing. So I'll be interested to see how that plays into Fall Prime Day strategy, Q4 strategy, brands using those and what Amazon might introduce or do with that that is different than virtual bundles. But just calling that out, if you haven't seen it yet, it's not in every account yet. You won't be notified when Amazon creates something for you, but you can search what is virtual multi-pack, so VMP.
PMP, yeah.
Yeah, so filter all inventory by VMP, and you should be able to see if they've created any of those for your products and make adjustments as you see fit. But basically, that's just taking your FBA inventory, bundling it into multi-packs, and letting it be sold that way without physically bundling it together. You don't have to do it and send it in that way. Amazon's just doing that to try to increase AOV.
Yeah, and if you need help looking at those and looking at, because there's still fees obviously involved at the single product sale. And so looking at that and then weighing, should I just set up my own, hard kit bundle instead to have a difference of fees? That's something that we can sit down and kind of run through what the numbers look like because it does change. And in Q4, those fees will shift, a lot of the storage fees and stuff shift as well. So just keeping that in mind with your profitability.
Awesome. Great call out there as well. All right, so another one here about advertising cost, what really changed, what we were seeing versus what we expected. And, this may be a place where some of the things we call out might give you a different perspective on how you actually performed. It might give you some things to go back and check in your accounts and see, was it actually as successful as I thought once I look at all these other things?
Yeah, especially with CPCs. I say it all the time. CPCs are up and they're going to continue to be up, but especially during these tentpole really big events where there's lots of traffic, especially in those first few hours of the event. That is where you're going to see a lot of your engagement across your campaigns. And that's okay. I will say that is okay. People are browsing and people are really, going around and looking to see what they want to purchase. They're comparing, they're trying to check into, other brands. They're seeing what the best value is for them. But that does mean front loading that budget. This is something I will call out. Keep your campaigns active where possible and where it makes sense. This is something that I really make sure is done every event, no matter what, even if it's a small event. Monitor your campaigns. The data does lag. So a campaign could say that it's out of budget when it still says that it's only spent like $10 for the day so far. That is the case. That does happen because Amazon has gotten better with the data coming through more close to real time as possible, but there's still quite a delay. So be prepared for those CPC increases, but still follow conversion, follow the actual dollars that are coming to your account, follow the revenue. Exposure is nice, sure. It's great to get out there, but if you're not seeing a correlation to the conversion on particular ASINs, reduce the spend, keep a closer eye on those budgets, maybe let them run out of budget, full transparency. If you're not seeing any sales correlated throughout the day, that's okay because you still have 3 more days of the event. You can do some adjustments. You can pull down those bids. You can be less aggressive with that spend so those campaigns stay active longer throughout the day. And top of search, we all love it. It's pretty cool. It's nice to be the first result that shows up, but make sure it's worth it. I will say, if you have keywords that are historically like great indicators of conversion and they do well in a regular time period leading up to the event, months before, weeks before, those are ones that you definitely want to lean into because they have the data to back it up. Don't just try to start going after short tail, high cost keywords the first day of the event if you haven't done it before. I'll be completely honest there. That could be a gamble because you may spend a lot really quick and then not know what to expect on the outside of that. And one other thing, branded placement. This is the age old, how much do I spend on branded keywords? Or should I just, let people find my brand organically because I have, great SEO when I show up great in the organic placement? Still be cautious with your branded spend. I am from the school of thought where I do think there is still a spot for branded spend, but that shouldn't be a large majority of your spend as a whole. I still believe in attracting new shoppers through non-branded placements that leads to more new to brand conversions instead. I think that's a big focus right now is increasing that new to brand because people who haven't heard of your brand aren't necessarily just going to search for your brand. They're going to search for other general non-branded keywords and then they'll discover your brand and then they may search your brand name again in the future when they want to purchase from you again. And I know that was a lot really fast, but that's just some quick call outs about the craziness of advertising during any Prime Day.
Well, and something too about the top of search, those placements, the some of that increased as well because of Amazon rolling out in the last year, Amazon marketing cloud audiences to be able to increase the top of search based on the audience placements. And so we did see a rise in some of those CPCs as that audience is getting more tailored, but a higher CPC, but more sales that came of it is, that's a good balance. So if you're not playing with um, some audiences in terms of trying to, using AMC to build audiences that then you add to a current sponsored product campaign is a really good route to keep those people in that ecosystem and to use the data you got during this past event to build those audiences for the remainder
Yes.
of the year, as well as using the data from the 4 days of advertising for day parting and then seeing like where were your top hours during an event, because that tends to be pretty common as you go through the rest of, not only the summer, but using day parting of what went well during Q4 last year or what went well during Prime Day of this past year to then tell you kind of what are your peak hours for quarter 4 for the same tentpole events.
Ed, you mentioned that, it's great to get brand awareness, but like there's a certain point where that's not paying off, right? Because you're getting your brand in front of people, but it's not converting. But since we kind of look at that well, I would call it a Q3 event, since we look at Fall Prime Day as like a lighter event, Amazon's not prioritizing it, obviously. Is there any scenario in which either of you think that it makes sense to use that event strictly for brand awareness? So you're kind of building that opportunity then for Q4 purchases and you can go harder? Or is that like, are you just throwing away budget if you do that?
I think it's worth it if you're using a creative approach. Like you're just not bidding on your keyword in multiple campaigns just to get that placement. Because one thing I like doing is just doing placement checks, going into an incognito window where Amazon has no idea what I'm shopping for, looking for, and seeing where I show up organically for a brand, because I still want to make sure I'm holding strong placement there. But especially if you're going for brand placement, use video, like use any type of content that once again can drive traffic to your brand store so you keep them in your ecosystem. I think that's a better use of that branded spin. And I do think there is some leverage for using it for like a fall prime to kind of get that name out there so people can understand who you are, what you offer. But the best way to do that is through strong creative that shows your brand, shows your products, and then leads them to your store where you're not just pushing one ASIN through a branded keyword. I think my thoughts have changed about branded over the years just because I see where the bleed can come from for just spending just to spend, where you could get some of those sales organically. But I do think there is a way to leverage that with strong creative advertising during an event like Fall Prime to kind of get that name out there and make sure people are seeing you when they're searching you, but tell them about your brand in that process. Don't just throw up one ASIN just to hold that placement. Like make it more of a discovery that can then lead to a bond with your brand. So they want to buy from you in the future because they understand what you offer and what you really are about.
Okay. Yeah, fair. That makes sense. Alexi, I saw you come off mute. Did you have something to add?
Oh, no, you're good. He's good.
Okay.
We'll go.
Moving right along. We're going to launch our next poll here, provided I can get the webinar controls to come up. Apologies that if you've seen the slides kind of pop around a little. Zoom has changed the interface completely for a host, and everything is blocking the slides for me. So I'm trying my best to see what I'm queuing up here. So one more poll here. This is the last one of the event, but we would love your participation because again, it really just helps us understand who we're talking to and how we need to tailor what we're speaking about. The last question was similar to this, like, did you have a successful Prime Day? But now really drilling in, do you actually know if your spend paid off? And that's different than whether or not, did you have a successful Prime Day. So let me go to poll 2 here and launch this. And the question this time, do you know if it paid off? Yes, we measure incrementality, so we do have a good feel for that. We look at ROAS only, or honestly, no, which is totally fair if you answer that because lots of people are in that same boat. So we'll leave this up for a few more seconds here, give you at least 30 seconds to chime in. And it's a pretty even split between people who measured incrementally and feel, oh, well, now we have people coming in on the ROAS. So split across the board all three ways. There's a little bit of everything. Some people are measuring it down to, the percent here and they know what they've got going on. Some people truly don't have a feel for it, but they think that it's been good. And then we do have some who are just looking at the ROAS, and as long as the ROAS is good, that's meeting their goals. But looking like as we get towards the end here, a little bit stronger with people who feel that they do know exactly how they perform because they're measuring all of those metrics. So great feedback. Thank you. I'm going to end this poll and we'll move on to the next slide. So for those of you who weren't sure, or those of you who really think that it paid off, we're going to dive into the things you should be looking at here that actually tell that story for you, because it isn't just advertising. There's a lot of other stuff going on. We're suggesting, and obviously there's more than this, but 4 things you really can look at that could be key indicators: the units that you've moved, not just the revenue, especially if you're running discounts, right? That revenue is a little bit skewed, but how many units are you moving and is that profitable? New to brand share, total ACoS, not just ad ACoS, and brand halo. So we've got probably a good 15 minutes here, but I do want to move a little quickly. But Ed, Alexi, if either of you want to jump in, let's try and get, 2 and 2 and then move on so we don't run over.
I'll just new to brand is such a big, I know it's a buzzword, especially in the category of the market, but it's huge. I have been really focused on new to brand a lot lately, especially for brands that have a really strong brand presence and they have great creative. I do want people to continue to focus on new to brand. It's awesome to see sales. It's awesome to see revenue coming through. But if it's just the same people purchasing over and over, of course there is subscribe and save. That's awesome to see. But really dive into new to brand, especially throughout tentpole events. Keep an eye on that in comparison to a regular time period leading up or after the event as well. I think this is a big metric to really continue to track leading in through Q3 and into Q4. For a long time, I just wanted to see month over month increase in new to brand. Even if there was a tentpole event and there wasn't the following month, still thinking about what you can do to scale that new to brand through audience targeting, through remarketing to try to get people to finally convert if they haven't before. And especially through DSP, you can do some type of advertising where you're excluding anyone that has purchased in the past as well. So I think new to brand is only going to become a bigger focus moving throughout this year and into next year. And start looking into it early. See what products are driving that new to brand and see what type of creative in your ads is really helping to attribute to a higher new to brand percentage month over month. That was my biggest thing. I'll stop there.
Very good. I feel like, yeah, we covered a lot of this already throughout most of, most of our discussion. So just echoing, of course, what Edward said, as well as, we talked about brand halo and on, certain items where you have the budget or the margin, I should say, to run a deal, but have it share with a listing that that you don't have that margin with. So you're not running the deal on it. So you also get that brand halo lift there. And then as much as, traffic that you can drive from off Amazon channels, if you are running a deal, just to try to spike some of that momentum, that helps with that brand halo lift as well. And Amazon loves when you send off Amazon traffic to the platform. And then looking kind of, we talked about being able to build multi-packs, moving more units just ahead of, especially if you can move a lot before you get into the higher fee season, and move as much product as possible, especially if it's summer related and you're trying to sell through it before we head into Q4.
All great feedback. And, we could probably talk for an hour just about this slide, but those are the key takeaways. We're going to move on to the next one here, and really get into some mistakes that were made, or could be made and that we could see again. So hopefully this gives you some really great feedback on what to take a look at that might have happened to you already this year. If you're going to make those mistakes again, definitely make them during this lighter fall Prime Day, learn from them, and then, be prepared for Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So, some mistakes that we saw across this past Prime Day, flat budgets, spiking through auction overbidding, spending behind out of stock ASINs, promotion stacking. And that's a big one, I think, that a lot of people overlook. If you've got a really great advertising strategy, you dial in on that, but then you might forget about the extra things that are outside of your true advertising strategy that cause issues there. I'm going to move to the next slide and just cover the last couple of mistakes we covered, and then feel free to chime in anywhere, guys. But cutting the spend the day that the sale ended, and then leaving a deal price live. Two different sides of the same coin there. So any one of these things alone can cause big issues for you. Combined, massive issues. You maybe didn't make them all, but understanding what the potential is for making these mistakes might help you continue to avoid them more easily in the future. Any of these you guys want to dive into a little bit more?
Go ahead, Alex.
I was like, who's going to talk? Yeah, no, something to keep in mind just with promotion stacking as well as, the having the deal price. I spoke earlier about, Amazon extending the look back window for Prime exclusive discounts, for example, to be 60 days of, having the price be the lowest price, instead of it being the normal 30 days that it has been. So if you leave some of the deals running, which based on the timing of when Prime summer was to fall Prime, you're kind of, going to be okay there, but it may affect you when you go from fall Prime to Black Friday, depending on what you want to run. So kind of talk through that, look at all the numbers, make sure all the dates line up, because it really sucks the day before to realize that you can't run the deal you thought and you have to do, 28% rather than 25% in order to get the badge. When you thought you were only have to do 20 and you already increased it, which is not fun. And then also with
Not fun,
staff
and you could miss it, right? If you
and
set up your
yes.
deals and you
Mhm.
don't go back and check for that, you think you're running a 25% off deal and then find out later you did not.
You did not. And the same thing with, brand tailor promotions and other promos that happen. Amazon looks at that lowest price. So whatever that average price is, any deal that you've run of any sort of discount is going to be taken into account. So just being very mindful. We really encourage our brands to turn off brand tailor promotions during an event if you're running deals. If you're not running deals and just kind of keeping things same old, like then leave the brand tailor promotions on. But just something you want to watch because it's very easy to not realize because there's everything lives in a different place in Amazon as well as the new interface that I know is not that new, but we all, waited to allow Amazon to shift that. The new view, things are just different. You just don't know where something is living. So if, audit that, look at those different places. But just there's so many cooks in the kitchen, and all the arms are, doing their own thing. So trying to look at that holistically and just make sure you're all buttoned up.
Yeah, I started working inside of Amazon interfaces in 2009, and every time they roll out a new version, I am still the person who waits until the very last day to switch to the new version. Or sometimes I don't even click the button to switch to the new version and I wait until they force me because I don't like change inside of how Seller Central or Vendor Central
Yeah.
looks. I don't recommend that to other people, but I will be honest and say that is how I approach it. I will play around with it and I'll call out changes and share things with other people, but in terms of actually swapping that so that it's my full-time view during the trial period, I will not do it. Ed, anything you wanted to add on any of these before we move on?
Just a call out to spending behind out of stock ASINs. This also very much applies to any product or ASIN that has an extended shipping window. So, like, even if the inventory is being processed through Amazon, it is still eligible for advertising. Be careful and be cautious with that, because the last thing I want is to see an ad for something, click on it, and it says that the shipping time is 2 weeks. I'm probably going to abandon that cart and not purchase that product. So be cautious when you're advertising those products that have the extended shipping window. If you are advertising those, maybe be a little more careful with your spend. Don't spend as much. Have lower bids just to kind of get some visibility, but don't put every dollar into those that have those, week, 2 week long shipping windows if it's a FBA product.
Yeah, great call. That was a huge change when Amazon started making those inbound, available or, any of those changes they made to the availability of stock and shipping differently than just the regular Prime today. It definitely hit people without expectations in terms of how that would impact spend. Cool. Well, then jumping ahead to our next section here, how you're actually going to turn that information that you got from June into something that you can use for Q4. I think we've talked around a lot of this already. It's hard to talk about what happened without talking about how you can then apply it. So we'll get a little more targeted here, but I think we'll still be on track to wrap this up on time with you guys because we have already gotten into some of the details. So the four things that you're really looking at, and obviously there are many, many things within each of these buckets, but the things that you need to have a dedicated plan for, the four areas are advertising, inventory, which if this is of particular interest to you, our webinar next month is going to be very much about this. We're partnering with Zon Prep to bring you some information, deeper dive into the inventory management piece. So we'll have a QR code at the end so you can sign up for that. But pricing and content are also very, very important. Content, I think, is one of the first ones you have to jump on because you've got to get that in place, and your pricing will go hand in hand with advertising. So how to build the curve based on June data. This is one I want to dig into a little bit more here of those four pillars. Definitely think both Alexi and Ed can add something here. But like, what's your one key takeaway? If you had to give one piece of advice for this specifically, what would you want people to know?
Use retargeting. Lord, please use retargeting. There's so much being left on the table throughout any type of event. And this could be just like, just Q4 as a whole. There's going to be a lot of people window shopping. I am guilty. I do it almost every week during Q4. I just shop around to see what's happening, what products are going to be discounted. Really leverage sponsored display and DSP, especially to retarget those people. I happen to be a huge fan of DSP on Amazon. Guilty. I do think it has really grown a lot over the past few years, and it does have a lot of comparable targeting and creative options compared to other DSP platforms too. So I think that's a huge one. Get those set up now. Go ahead and have that data behind them. And then when you're leading into Q4, you'll just see your audience and your reach grow as there was a lot more data and information coming in. Be This sounds weird, but be greedy with the data. Like you're getting so much data so quick. Like take advantage of that, and then you can make better optimizations and better adjustments quicker because you're just going to have so many more people engaging with your ads or even just viewing your ads, so you can see what's working and what's not working and pivot from there a lot quicker, as opposed to waiting till January and being like, oh wow, we learned a lot in Q4. I can't wait to use that this year. Do it now.
And if you're gonna use my one of my biggest takeaways, and I think I talked about doing hourly and day parting earlier, but test some of that, like test that stuff now while the traffic is lighter, because there is to a point that it's great to have the hourly data that Amazon is giving us to make decisions, but there's still delays, especially during tentpole events. And there's to a point that you can over optimize. Making optimizations, making changes is great, but also just like leave the oven shut for a little bit and let it cook. So finding that balance between the optimizing for performance, but not over optimizing, and then you ruined your ham in the oven. Find that balance and we'll find that happy medium, but it takes time to figure that out.
Excellent. Thank you. I feel like those are going to be some of our shorts or reels that we pull after this event that leave the oven door shut. Points 2 and 3, inventory and pricing. I have strong feelings on inventory, so I'm going to take this one first. There are two things. So for those of you who don't know, I started in the Amazon space in toy manufacturing. So for 10 years, I worked on the brand side in toys. And one thing I really learned from that, and it's gotten more and more true and more relevant year over year, is that the brands that have inventory throughout the season are the ones that win. And I know there is some value to getting it in, getting it sold out, and like moving away from the fees and stuff. But if you're doing that at a cost for your margins, it may not be the best plan. So my biggest advice on the inventory side is just making sure you have a great strategy of how much you want to give away at what price and adjusting for that. Because if you still have inventory that week before, when this all wraps up, and you can sell it at a higher price because you are one of the few who still has inventory. And this is incredibly relevant in the toy side of things for sure, but I think it really translates to pretty much every category. You can sell your product at a higher margin and make out much better because in 2026, I just had to look at my calendar to see what year it was. In 2026, people can order on Christmas Eve for delivery on Christmas Eve at like 7 p.m. So, just understand what that window really looks like now. It's different than it used to be. If you were a manufacturer who used to sell heavily into brick and mortar stores and you kind of had to have everything allocated for, by the 1st of November, that's not the case anymore. You can move it more slowly, more strategically throughout the season. So that's my big takeaway for inventory. Um, Pricing kind of flows into that, but I think there's a lot more behind pricing just by, how do you price it for when you want to move it? And Alexi's already gone into some of that in terms of like making sure your discounts align with the new look back windows and that sort of thing. Anything else anybody wants to add specifically on pricing here? I think we've
You're not going to
covered.
see the pricing, you're just not going to see the 40-50% off on Amazon anyway. So don't feel like you have to do that. Nobody's doing that anymore on Amazon. So I know they want us to, that was always you waited till Black Friday, get the doorbuster TV, etc. That customer behavior is shifting because everybody can get something immediate, as Jess said. And the only other thing I would add with the inventory, which I know we're coming up on time, um, but we just had this with one of our brands because they do small parcel shipments into Amazon. And it took something that was shipped at the beginning of June. Like we just recently had to open up a case because that shipment got lost. So they've been out of stock on that item because it took 7, 8 weeks for it to Amazon to finally say we didn't receive this. So working with a partner who can help you manage that. And I think that's coming up in a couple of weeks. The next webinar was on prep as a great avenue for that, with them helping you, with the shipments into FBA. But that is a big thing, is it's at the end of the day, Amazon faults you as the brand for running out of stock, even if your product was sitting on their dock, waiting for
Yes.
them to unload it. So
Even if they lost an entire container of your
yep.
goods, which has happened to multiple clients that we've worked with.
Yep. Even if Amazon lost it, it is still your fault that you ran out of stock, and you will get dinged for that. So being mindful about that and monitoring that, and it's just a pain piece that every brand deals with, but I think that is a great thing to, hold on to discuss on the next webinar. So
Absolutely. We do have one question that is related to the advertising side, that is very specific. So I want to make sure we answer this one before we run out of time. If we don't get to your questions today, we do have this information. We'll be able to email you directly and answer after the fact. But I want to see if we can get this one answered for Jeff. What's your take on turning off the ads account entirely for certain hours of Fall Prime or Black Friday, Cyber Monday, based on which hours seem to underperform? Um, when spend can get eaten up so quickly?
It's a great question. And I I'm more of the keep it on, but just at a lower bid personally, just because there's a lot of opportunity. So if you're using day parting, you're taking advantage of that instead of just turning off the ads completely and potentially not getting any exposure to your products during those times. You could just decrease those bids by quite a bit. So then that way you're not spending as much hour by hour. But then also on top of that, you can still be discovered. It may not be page one, may not be page two, but you can get some residual placements for a lot cheaper. And then if you make a sell at that lower bid in CPC, it's a lot better in terms of efficiency. So there's still an opportunity to gain some sales there. I come from the school of thought of, kind of always on, where it makes sense. Don't just spend to spend. So that is a great question. But I do think it is something, instead of turning off completely, lower your bids down quite a bit during those hours. And then you can even have automation in place where it does boost those bids back up to the regular levels when you do see better conversion rates throughout the days and just better sales in general. But that's my take. Just so you're still discoverable and you can still get some sales, but at a much cheaper cost and a much higher efficiency during those hours.
And we do, like, I know one brand I've worked with for years. We've always, year round, we lower everything from midnight to 4 a.m. Pacific time, because the peak evening hours are their best time. And so
Mhm.
that's all year we do that in order to not use that budget in the middle of the night. So highly recommend doing, having some sort of turn down. But again, don't optimize to every, 20 minutes, but, having that wider window to be, they just get a lot of perusers during that time. That's, a practice that we use a lot.
Perfect. Thank you guys. Going to move over to creative now and want to spend some time here, but we've got about 3 minutes left. So any questions we haven't been able to answer, we will definitely answer after the fact. We'll follow up with you by email, but want to make sure we get through this creative piece as well. So obviously, this is a massive part of success, because you can do everything you want to drive traffic to listings, but getting it to convert once shoppers get there relies on so many different facets of the listing. So your detail pages, the A plus content on those pages, your brand store itself, which we've talked a lot about how we can drive there, the video, the creative. Again, we're in a little bit of a crunch for time. So if you guys each have one call out, and Alexi, I'll go with you first on the creative side of things that like either was a problem that brands need to make sure they're looking at, or is something new and exciting you think would be, that everyone should be thinking about for Q4 specifically.
AI is great. You can use AI to create images. Be really careful with the humans, especially now with Amazon's regulations around AI with utilizing humans. But it's such a light lift now to have something, if you don't have the budget to do a full-blown, photo shoot, to start somewhere. But make updates, change the creative, because just like Meta and Google, the creative fatigue on Amazon is also a thing that people forget about.
Mhm. I'll say video, video, video. video, video, video. Video is becoming a bigger player in the terms of just like exposure on Amazon and just showing off your brand. There's a lot of short form media out there. There's Reels, there's YouTube Shorts, there's TikTok. Everybody is using it quite a bit. So lean into that. Test out new video creative. You can use some of the AI creative through Amazon as well to test some of those videos too. Test it out. Test it now, see what works, and then double down on it, especially when the traffic picks up during Q4.
Yeah, absolutely. And two things too to what you just shared, Ed. We do have, or both of you, we do have full creative services. So we're happy to support you, even if you don't work with us in advertising or full management. We would love to help support you with creative if you need to enhance some of those things before we get into Q4. And I know I said I had two, but I already forgot what the second one. Oh, TikTok. We haven't really talked about that. We do offer TikTok services now, and that can be another great way. As you mentioned TikTok, it's a great way to bring more brand awareness. So that is a strategy you can tap into before Q4 if you want to grow some brand awareness and then really double down on your Amazon. All right, jumping through real quick, I want to show this slide and give people a chance to take a screenshot or queue up some questions that they may have so you can get those things in there and we'll answer them after the fact. But here's really a recap of pretty much everything we talked through, things that you can do month by month to be prepared throughout the season. So I'll just pause here for a minute and then I do want to get to our last slide, which is where we do have two QR codes so you can either, connect with us more easily or sign up for the next webinar, which is going to be an exciting one. I know we've already kind of dropped some hints for that one. So go ahead and jump over there. As I shared, get those questions in. Q&A is still open. We will get you answered after the fact. And here's those QR codes. So if you are interested in learning more about anything that we shared today or just want a strategy to call to talk through like how prepared you are, scan that top code. You'll be directed to a form, fill out a little bit of information. It's not very invasive, I promise. And then we'll reach out to follow up with you. And if you liked this and you'd like to hear more from us, we would love to see you back. And we do have a webinar a little sooner rather than later. Usually we do every month towards the end of the month with all of the big events coming up for Q3. We bump things up a little. So our August webinar is actually going to be in 2 weeks and we would love to see you there. And as mentioned before, that is with our great partners on Prep. So go ahead and scan those. We have officially gone over time. So I'm going to thank both Alexi and Edward for joining us today. Appreciate you so much. If you have other places to be, feel free to drop off. I will stay on here. I'm going to go camera off and stay on so that people can continue to scan those codes, grab anything that they need from this webinar, and then we'll drop off about 5 minutes after the hour, but we'll leave those up so you can get what you need there. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you to everyone who joined us today, who shared questions. We appreciate everyone who has contributed to making this a great event, and we hope to see you next time.